Let's go directly to the area of voting, or voter assistance, for example, right before you vote. Florida has been the target, because of our terrible reputation, and deservedly so, of problems in elections. So a lot of organizations send volunteers to ensure that voters can be told the correct information, are not disenfranchised, because Florida has put all kinds of little tricks into the law to essentially have U-turns to nowhere for unwary voters. For example, the federal law requires that there be provisional ballots, and Florida was the reason why the Help America Vote Act has provisional ballots in it. A provisional ballot prevents an election official from disenfranchising a legal voter through some sort of mistake or paperwork error. We didn't have provisional ballots in 2000. It would have made a significant difference and probably changed the outcome of the 2000 election if we had it, because the state of Florida issued felons lists to every county of the state of Florida, and supervisor of elections like myself were told to remove those voters from the rolls before November 7, 2000. I checked my rolls, and when I checked my list of 697 names, I found that only 33 names on that list were actual felons. So we removed only 33 names, and everyone else got to vote. But in many counties of the state, and I'm thinking of directly of Volusia County, the supervisor of elections there removed everyone that was on that list off the rolls. In Jacksonville, the supervisor of elections removed everyone on that list off the rolls. And when these legal voters, people that had been sometimes voting for 25 years, 30 years, 40 years, came to vote, they were told, sir or ma'am, you're a felon, you cannot be allowed to vote under Florida law, and were turned away with not so much as one chance to cast a vote on election day. Faced with this egregious kind of problem, the Help America Vote Act incorporated in it something called a provisional ballot, which says that if you are told you are not a legal voter, you have the right to complete that ballot, and if you are a legal voter, have it counted. So it started out as a good thing, but what did Florida do? They limited it to its most narrow function. If a provisional vote is going to count, even though you are a legal voter of Leon County and you voted in Leon County for 25 years, if you cast a provisional ballot at the precinct that you weren't supposed to vote in the precinct, your provisional ballot is no good. So first off, you can only cast a provisional ballot if you're at the right voting location. And this is where third-party groups, individuals, parties, lawyers have tried to explain to voters, and they hold up signs for voters outside early voting locations and polling places saying, do you have any questions about the process? We'll help you. And I don't have a problem with these groups providing voter assistance, but obviously the too accessible election of 2008, the Florida legislature does have severe problems. They made it a crime to help a voter by giving them accurate and truthful information. No individual may hold up a sign, use a megaphone, or otherwise in any way approach a voter and suggest to them, if you have any questions about the process, I will assist you for free. That is an illegal act in this legislation. So again, going beyond making voter registration harder, getting helpful information on how to vote properly without losing your vote, the final area of voting that I want to focus on is the actual casting of your ballot. It has been the law in Florida for more than 40 years that if you move from one location to another location, that's called an address change. And all address changes could be done at your polling place or early voting location, and then you are given the correct ballot and you're allowed to vote in the normal fashion. And in fact, when Florida built the Florida State Voter Registration Database, which is the federally required statewide voter registration system that every state in the country is supposed to build, we built it with the capability of checking voters while they were in early voting or at the precinct waiting to vote and confirm that they are a legal voter in our jurisdiction, and they are eliminated and prohibited and cannot in any way, shape, or form cast any other vote other than that one legitimate vote. So that was what the voter registration system in Florida was designed to handle. And in this legislation, it says that supervisor of elections cannot use the technical capabilities that the system was designed for. And in fact, Florida legislators are changing the law that has been the law for over 4 decades, so that if you change an address 29 days before the election, you must vote on one of these provisional ballots. Well, there's one thing I didn't tell you about provisional ballots under Florida law. Well, in the state of California, they have a month to count provisional ballots. In the state of Florida, the Florida legislature has seen fit to give election officials 2 days to count those provisional ballots. Leon County labored mightily in November of 2008 to process and go through and analyze every one of the 728 people who voted provisionally. And I can tell you that we finished up minutes before the deadline. We were actually on live time emailing the final figures on who was votes we're going to count on provisional ballots and signing them on to the canvassing board certificates as the deadline approached. If the law relative to now changing all address changes made within 29 days was in effect in the November election that we just had, that number of 728 would have risen to 18,209. That's a 25-fold increase in the workload. And of course, did the legislature give us 1 more minute to process these? Well, the answer is obvious, no. We could not, and there's no way that I can conceive of how we could actually check 18,000 provisional ballot voters' envelopes within the 48-hour deadline. And so what this would unfortunately result is hundreds, if not thousands of people who, if we could have checked them, might have been a legal voter, they won't get checked. And this is precisely the kind of egregious tactic, changing the current law which works, changing a current law which uses the highest and best technology of the Florida voter registration database and voter registration system to essentially lead to a nightmare jamming of election administration procedures to essentially disenfranchise potentially thousands of voters. And it is not by accident that groups such as new voters, the elderly, and the minorities are the targets of this legislation. We analyzed who were the individuals who change addresses. Those are likely to be the poor, read minority, very new voters not familiar with the system, read young voters. And who did these 2 groups of citizens vote for in the last presidential election? They voted Democratic, and that is why they're targeted for having thousands of them potentially disenfranchised. And so you can see why I call this the Florida Voter Suppression Act of 2009. That is its intended effect. You're changing long-held laws that allow for the efficient processing of voters to cast their ballots and make it into an unwieldy paperwork nightmare for both the voter and the election official, so that at the end of this process, Florida voters, some of them unfortunately, will not have their votes counted.